The first time anyone mentioned Operation Ashfall, it was said in a whisper. A mission deep into the Black Ravine, a place so cursed it never made it onto official maps. Commanders avoided even thinking about it, much less sending men into it. But when a high-ranking intelligence officer went missing, along with a convoy of diplomatic assets, HQ had no choice. They needed a retrieval squad. Volunteers. 0. So they assigned a team. That's how Sergeant Leo Maddox found himself packing gear he didn't expect to unpack again. Maddox wasn't a hero. He never wanted to be. He'd joined the service young, trying to escape the drunken fists of his stepfather and the echoing silence of a broken home. He didn't like medals, didn't like speeches, but he was good at following orders, good at getting his squad home. All but once. So when they told him about Ashfall, a mission every man in the room tried to avoid, he didn't argue. He just nodded, saluted, and went back to cleaning his rifle. The squad was 6 men strong. Corporal Jason Rudd, the loudmouth who cracked jokes even during fight. Private Diaz, a fresh-faced medic who hadn't yet learned how to bandage his own fear. Thompson, Andrews, Parks, and Maddox. Bay boarded a silent chopper at 0400. No send-off, no press. The only briefing came from a ghost-eyed major who handed Maddox a sealed folder and said, "Do not open this until boots are on the ground. And whatever you see in there, don't talk about it. Not even with your men." Maddox didn't ask why. He already knew the answer. This wasn't just about a missing officer. The ride to the drop zone was uneventful, eerily so. Maddox could feel the tension rippling through his team. The silence wasn't the kind that came from focus. It was the silence of dread, the kind that eats into your bones. The Black Ravine was a natural scar on the earth, 30 miles wide, deeper than anyone had dared measure, and shrouded in a mist that never moved. Local legends spoke of strange lights, voices echoing at night, and men who entered the ravine only to come out mad, or not at all. Still, Maddox's boots hit the gravel, and he cracked the seal on the folder. Inside were grainy photos, satellite, images distorted by static, symbols that weren't language but still felt like they meant something, and at the center, a crumbling bunker embedded in the cliff face, marked with an old emblem no longer used by any known branch of the military. Beneath the photos was a single line typed in red ink: "Do not go past the second level. Do not open the inner door." By nightfall, they'd reached the bunker. It was dead silent. No birds, no insects, no wind. Just the soft hiss of their own breathing inside the helmets. Rudd tried to make a joke, something about Scooby-Doo, but no one laughed. The entrance had clearly been breached. The metal door was buckled inward, as if something had escaped, not forced its way in. They moved in formation, Maddox lead, flashlights scanning the dark, rifles raised. The first level looked like any abandoned military site. Broken furniture, rusted tech, bullet casings. No bodies but trails of blood that led deeper. The lights flickered, even though no power should have been running. Maddox felt it in his chest, like the walls were breathing, like they were watching. They reached a second level. That's when things started to go wrong. Thompson was the first. One moment he was checking the far end of the hall, the next he was screaming, clutching his helmet, firing his rifle blindly at the walls. It took 3 of them to pin him down. He kept shouting one word over and over. "Voices, voices, inside me." They sedated him. Maddox ordered a retreat, but the stairwell was gone. Not collapsed. Gone. Just a smooth wall of seamless concrete, where the way out had been. Diaz vomited. Rudd cursed and kicked the wall until his boot split. Then the lights dimmed, not flickered, but lowered, as if someone had turned down the world's brightness. They were trapped, and the bunker began to change. Maddox ordered them to fortify a room on the second level. They barricaded the door, stacked crates, and tried to calm down Thompson, who now stared blankly at the ceiling, whispering words in a language none of them recognized. Night. The dreams came. Diaz woke up crying, clawing at his own face. Parks kept muttering about a girl named Emily, his daughter. The problem: Parks didn't have any kids. Maddox didn't sleep. He sat against the wall with his rifle across his chest, staring at the sealed door at the far end of the hall, the one marked inner chamber, the one the file said not to open. At 0400, it began to knock. 3 slow knocks, followed by a child's voice: "Sergeant Maddox, let me out now, please. I'm cold." To be continued. The snow was falling thicker now, a curtain of white that muted everything: sound, movement, even thought. As Alex trudged through the dense forest, his boots crunching through knee-deep drifts, the warmth of the world he'd known before seemed like a forgotten dream. Each step was a war against the wind, against gravity, against the weight of what he had seen. Behind him, the compound still burned. Not with fire, those had long since died, but with memory. The screams, the thundering chaos, the sudden silence when the last man fell. And through it all, one sound haunted him more than anything: the soft hum of the generator under the floor, just before it exploded. It was the hum of inevitability, of failure, of death. He reached the edge of a ridge and collapsed behind a snow-covered log, drawing his scarf up against the biting wind. His hand trembled as he pulled out the dog tags. 6 of them looped, together with his own. The names were etched in steel, but the faces were burned into his soul. Jenkins, Morales, Thompson, even Novak, who'd made jokes through gunfire, had gone quiet in the end. Alex hadn't cried during the battle. He hadn't screamed. He hadn't cursed the heavens or begged for a second chance. No, he had only moved, survived, done what was necessary. It wasn't until now, shivering under a pine tree on the edge of nowhere, that the damn cracked. One tear froze on his cheek. It had started as a rescue op, clean, tactical, in and out. Command believed a group of civilians had been taken by the Crimson Scars, a paramilitary faction known for its brutal tactics and disturbing ideology. Their compound was buried in the mountains, and satellite imagery confirmed a steady power output unusual for abandoned territory. Alex and his team were dropped in just before dawn. 8 men, all elite. No one doubted the mission. They trusted their training, trusted each other, but no training could have prepared them for what they found inside. The compound was a maze of corridors and makeshift labs. At first, they saw no civilians, just empty halls, red lights blinking, the echo of boots on concrete. Then they found the rooms, dozens of them, lined with machines and restraints. And the people inside weren't right. Their eyes were glazed, skin pale, lips whispering things no human should know, like they'd been used. Altered. Novak had vomited. Even Captain Reyes, who'd seen action in 4 continents, looked like he'd aged 10 years. Then came the ambush. They came from the ceilings, from the walls, men and women in ragged uniforms, skin tattooed with strange black symbols, eyes burning with fanatic rage. The Crimson Scars weren't trying to win, they were trying to sacrifice. Reyes was the first to go down, shot through the throat before he could call for retreat. Jenkins fell shielding Morales. Thompson detonated a grenade at point blank to stop the wave crashing down the corridor. It was madness, a blood ritual painted in gunpowder and screams. Only Alex, bleeding from his arm, made it to the control room. That's when he saw the generator, not for power, but for something worse, something ancient, pulsing with a light that moved like liquid thought, something they had tried to awaken. He didn't think, just acted, overloaded the system. Wired. The charges watched it burn. When Alex stumbled into the extraction point hours later, the chopper crew almost didn't recognize him. His face was covered in soot and blood, his voice broken. He didn't answer questions. He just handed over the tags, saluted, and stared out across the snow-covered trees. The official report called it a victory. Operation Silent Flame, 1 casualty confirmed, others Mia, hostile, compound neutralized. But the military didn't. Ask why Alex stopped talking for weeks. Or why he screamed in his sleep. Or why he couldn't look at his own reflection without seeing Reyes or Novak or the flickering blue light under his skin. Back in his apartment, far from the battlefield, Alex kept their photos on his wall. 8 frames, only 1 remained unbroken. His end, he hated it. Hated that he'd lived when the better men didn't. Hated that he still smelled the coppery sting of blood every time he closed his eyes. He tried therapy. Didn't work. Tried silence. Worse. Then he tried whiskey. That numbed it, until it didn't. But one night standing on the rooftop under the stars, something changed. A shadow moved across the sky, far too fast for a plane. And just for a moment, the hum returned, low, mechanical, alive. The same hum from beneath the generator. From beneath the generator. He wasn't done. Whatever they had been awakening hadn't died. Just shifted, waited, and somehow Alex knew it remembered him too. He began investigating, going beyond the reports, tracking names, patterns, whispers on black market boards. The Crimson Scars weren't gone, just fragmented. Rumors of new symbols appearing on bodies pulled from rivers, of languages whispered by people in comas. Alex didn't return to the military. He didn't trust them anymore. Instead, he packed his gear, found the old team's abandoned safe house, and built a war map, a new mission, one only he could complete, because he wasn't the same man who walked into that compound. He had walked out alive, but something else had walked out with him. The sun never rose the same way after that mission, even now. When Adrian Silva stepped outside and felt morning warmth on his skin, it carried no comfort, only a distant ache. The world moved on. Trucks rumbled past his quiet suburban home, children played on sidewalks, and neighbors waved like nothing had ever happened. But for Adrian, time had split itself into 2 timelines. The before, when they laughed, trained, and trusted each other without question, and the after, where silence echoed louder than bullets. They called it a recon mission in their official debriefings, but everyone in his unit knew it was a setup. They had walked into the Hornet's Nest, a derelict village near the border of Orvac and Sylvan territory, under the impression that enemy activity was minimal. Instead, they were swarmed, outnumbered, outgunned, and left with a single extraction point that was already compromised out by the time the gunfire subsided. Adrian was the only one left standing, but alive was a generous term. What he dragged back from that place was a body still breathing. Yes, but the man inside had been left behind. Trapped in the smoldering ruins of a friendship and loyalty no metal could resurrect. There used to be 6 code names etched on his soul like ghost scars: Wolf, Cricket, Hayes, Mako, Juno, and Reaper. Adrian was Reaper, the sniper, the Overwatch, the cold calculated shot that ended what others couldn't. The irony of the name wasn't lost on him. When he realized he was the one left to carry death's burden, Mako was the first to fall, hit by a trip mine no one saw coming. It wasn't just the explosion, it was the silence that followed. The team froze. Then chaos erupted. That was the moment Adrian's memory became fragmented, like torn film strips. He remembered Hayes screaming for backup, Wolf dragging a bleeding cricket into cover, and Juno laying down suppressive fire as if she could will their survival into reality. He remembered the blood, too much of it. He remembered the enemy voices, foreign but sharp, as they crept around the buildings like shadows. And then he remembered the moment he knew no one else was going to make it. In the weeks that followed, they tried to give him a hero's welcome. There were flags, salutes, a ceremony where some general who never saw a day of combat pinned a medal on his chest and called him a symbol of sacrifice. But Adrian didn't feel like a symbol. He felt like a fraud, a man who should have died with his team, who instead crawled out of the fire while the real heroes never even got a chance to say goodbye. He stopped attending events after that, stopped talking to reporters, stopped answering messages from the families because what could he say? That their son or daughter died screaming? That he heard Juno's final breath through the headset and did nothing? That Wolf's last words were a half-choked whisper begging him not to leave? No, Adrian carried those secrets in silence, not out of duty, but out of guilt so heavy it felt like armor he could never remove. Then came the nightmares. At first, they were fleeting. Flickers of muzzle flashes in the dark, the thud of bodies hitting the ground. But soon they became vivid, living memories that wrapped around his throat like a noose. He'd wake up drenched in sweat, heart pounding, fists clenched as if still gripping the trigger of his rifle. Sometimes he saw Juno smiling at him, her face suddenly exploding into blood. Sometimes he heard Mako laughing, right before the mine took him apart. But the worst was always Cricket Young, always grinning, always singing off-key, crawling toward him with no legs, begging not to be left behind. Adrian would scream himself awake, and no one ever came to check. He tried therapy, once sat across from a well-meaning woman who wore pastels, and offered tissues like they could wipe away trauma. She asked him about survivor's guilt and whether he ever processed the event. Adrian just stared at the small potted plant on her desk and thought about how absurd the world had become, that somewhere flowers bloomed while bodies rotted beneath rubble. He didn't go back after the third session. Instead, he bought a used motorcycle, took long rides into the desert, let the roar of the engine drown out the screams in his head. There were nights when he came dangerously close to riding off cliffs, not out of intent, but because he no longer cared where the road ended. But something always stopped him. Maybe it was Juno's voice in his memory, telling him he still had more to do. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was cowardice. But Adrian kept coming back. One evening, at a gas station 2 towns over, he met a kid, just a teenager, maybe 16, Max, staring wide-eyed at Adrian's jacket, which still bore the faded emblem of his unit. "You were Reaper, right?" the kid asked, voice cracking slightly. "My brother used to talk about you." Adrian froze. The kid pulled out a folded photograph, old, frayed at the edges. In it, Mako stood with his arm around the boy, laughing. He said you were the best shot he'd ever seen. Said he trusted you more than anyone. Adrian stared at the photo for what felt like hours. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "I failed him." The boy shook his head. "No, sir," he said, "if anything ever happened, it wasn't your fault." He said being with your team was the best part of his life. Tears burned in Adrian's eyes for the first time in years. That night, he returned home and dug out an old metal box from the back of his closet. Inside were dog tags, faded mission notes, a patch from Cricket's lucky vest, and a single bullet he had never fired, saved for a moment he thought might one day come. He didn't touch the bullet. Instead, he placed the photo of Mako and the boy inside the box, not as a reminder of what was lost, but of what still remained. He was still breathing, and maybe, just maybe, that meant he had something left to give. The desert stretched before Marcus like a canvas of suffering. Every step forward dragged his boots through dust that whispered of old blood and forgotten battles. The sun wasn't just hot, it was punishing, like it held a grudge. But Marcus didn't feel it anymore. Not fully. Since the bunker. Since that one cursed day, part of him moved through the world as if on the edge of waking. Never fully here. Never fully gone. Behind him, the 2 survivors he had rescued, Elena and Torres, struggled to keep pace. Their footsteps faltered, the weight of trauma sinking into their bones. Elena, once a medtech with a quick wit, now rarely spoke. Torres, a comms officer who had lost his whole squad in Sector 9, was running on fumes and fear. Still, they followed Marcus like pilgrims trailing a ghost. They had found the map by accident. In the ruins of an old outpost buried beneath collapsed rocks, Marcus had uncovered, etched not on paper, but burned into the metal wall of a command chamber, coordinates, symbols, and one phrase scratched in another hand, with something sharp and desperate. The ones who screamed never made it, but the silent, they walked out. Marcus hadn't told the others what it said. He only stared at it, running his fingers across the scorched etchings until the metal felt warm. Like the day, the path the map led them on wasn't marked on any official route. No GPS pinged, no satellite traced it. It wound them through forgotten trenches, tunnels older than the war itself, and jagged ridgelines that cut the sky like broken bones, and in every shadow, Marcus expected to see them. The echoes they were never seen in daylight. But they were real, Marcus knew. He remembered their whispers behind metal doors, the way they mimicked voices of dead comrades, the scraping sounds as they moved through vents. At night, when Torres shivered and Alina lay frozen in sweat, Marcus stood watch, always watch, and the distant tapping, it returned. That night, deep inside a canyon carved by time and torment, they made camp. A dying fire gave them little heat, but they didn't dare light anything brighter. Above, the stars blinked, distant and uncaring. "Tell us," Torres finally said, his voice dry. "What happened that day?" In the bunker, Marcus didn't answer. Not at first. Alina leaned forward. "We need to know. We keep following you like you're a savior, but something's not right. You never sleep. You always know when they're close. They don't follow sound," Marcus whispered. "They follow guilt. They follow guilt." Torres blinked. "What?" The echoes. "They're not hunting us because we're alive. They're hunting us because we remember." He looked away, past them, into the dark. "You don't walk out of that place unless you leave a piece of yourself." Behind he stood up then, his silhouette sharp against the stars. "I left them," Marcus said, voice raw. "I left my team, sealed the inner hatch behind me. I told myself they were already dead, but I heard them scream." Alina covered her mouth. Torres stood. "Jesus." But one stopped screaming. One stayed quiet. Marcus continued. "He was just 19, Daniel's rookie. He didn't beg, didn't call out, just stared at me through the viewport as the doors closed. I still see his eyes. No hate in them, no fear, just silence. And that's why you survived," Alina said softly. Marcus nodded. "The echoes couldn't find him. He gave them nothing. No sound. No fear. He disappeared from them. And maybe, in a way, so did I." They were quiet for a long time. Even the wind held its breath. Then Marcus added, "But they found me later. Not the creatures." His silence. "It found me. Fills every crack inside." Suddenly, a low hum filled the canyon. Torres reached for his weapon. Elena's eyes went wide. "Too soon," Marcus muttered. "They shouldn't be here yet." The humming deepened like a vibration through the rock itself. Then came the echoing thud's footsteps. Machinery. Something unnatural. Marcus pointed to the crevice behind the ridge. "Move now." They scrambled, ducking into a rock channel so narrow they had to crawl. The sound above grew sharper, metal scraping stone. A voice rang out. "Not human. Not machine." Marcus froze. It was Daniel's. "Marcus, you left me," but the tone was wrong, mechanical, stretched like something mimicking a recording, trying to force human emotion through an alien filter. Torres gasped. "That's it. Can't be. They're trying to draw us out," Marcus said quickly. "Don't answer. Don't breathe loud," the voice called again. "You watched me die." Elena's hands trembled. Marcus shut his eyes. Silence. "That's the only way." After long minutes, the noise faded. The hum receded. All that was left was the sound of breathing, the scrape of rocks against skin. They emerged when dawn came, blinking under the pale light. The desert looked the same, but something had changed in all of them. They weren't just walking toward answers now. They were walking toward judgment, toward the last place on the map, a black circle with a single word written beside it in a language none of them recognized. Marcus stared at it, then looked up at the horizon. A shape rose in the distance, an angular fortress, half buried in sand and shadow. "The Vault of Echoes," he said. Torres touched his shoulder. "You sure you want to go back?" Marcus's voice was a whisper. "I never left." The wind in the valley sang a dirge of its own. It wasn't the kind of wind that merely rustled leaves. This one howled through jagged rocks, dragging whispers of the dead with it. Malik had reached what the old maps called the Valley of Bones, a name locals had spoken only in hushed tones, fearing that even speaking it too loud might awaken what slumbered within. His boots crunched over dry, brittle fragments. At first he thought it was just gravel, then he looked down and realized the truth. Skeletal remains, thousands of them, scattered like a forgotten army trampled under time. Rib cages, skulls, femurs, all bleached by the sun, telling a silent story of massacre, betrayal, or something. Far worse. The tracker who had guided him this far, an old man with one eye and no name, had vanished the night before. Malik had awakened to find his footprints leading out of camp. And abruptly stopping in the sand. No sign of a struggle, no blood, just gone. Like the land had swallowed him whole. But Malik couldn't turn back now. His orders weren't just orders anymore. They were a mission of personal reckoning. Somewhere in this valley was the thing that haunted his nights. The truth that kept pulling him further away from the man he once was. He wasn't the same soldier who had walked into that bunker 5 years ago and come out alive, but broken. He was searching for what he had lost, even if it was his soul. As he moved deeper into the valley, the air grew heavy. The sun dimmed unnaturally, as if some unseen force were veiling the sky. He saw symbols etched into the rocks, spirals, crude faces, and what looked like tall humanoid figures with hollow eyes. Each symbol pulsed with a faint glow when he passed, like a heartbeat coming from stone. Then came the sound, rhythmic, distant, metallic. Clang, clang, clang. It echoed off every rock face, surrounding him, disorienting him. Malik followed it. He found himself at the mouth of a cavern carved into a cliffside. Its opening looked like a screaming mouth frozen in stone, and from its depths came that dreadful sound. Without hesitation, he stepped inside, flashlight in one hand, sidearm in the other. The tunnel descended steeply. Strange carvings lined the walls, each one more twisted and surreal than the last. There were images of men bowing before towering creatures with serpent-like heads. Others showed something worse, people willingly peeling off their own skin, in offerings. The clangs grew louder, and then he reached the chamber. It was vast, like a cathedral beneath the earth. Dozens of columns supported the ceiling, each wrapped in desiccated remains. In the center of the chamber stood an altar. Upon it, a figure. It was him. Malik froze. On the altar, laid out like a sacrificial lamb, was himself, just as he had looked 5 years ago. Same uniform, same burned scars. Eyes wide open, except. That version of him didn't blink. Then the shadows around the altar shifted, and from the dark corners emerged tall figures. Not fully human, not animal. Their limbs bent wrong. Their eyes glowed faint blue, and their skin shimmered like obsidian underwater. They made no sound as they surrounded the altar, nor did they acknowledge Malik. The other Malik, on the altar, sat up. "You came back?" it said in a voice that was his. And not, "What? What are you?" Malik choked. The creature smiled, a horrifying imitation of his own smirk. "I'm what was left behind. The part you abandoned when you ran. You left me to them." Images slammed into Malik's mind, memories he'd buried. His squad screaming, the metallic door slamming shut, the voices in the dark whispering secrets, the cold, ancient machine pulsing under the earth. And then the deal, the choice he was given, save his own life, or die with the others. He had chosen life, but something had taken his place. "They fed on your fear," the double said, "and I fed on theirs." The surrounding figures knelt as the double stood from the altar. "You're not here to stop me. You're here to join me, to make whole what was broken." Malik raised his weapon, hands trembling. "I'm not you," he hissed. The chamber trembled. "Then prove it," the double whispered. "End this." And suddenly, Malik was alone again. No altar, no creatures, just the stillness of the chamber. Was it a vision, a trick, or had something truly spoken to him? He didn't know, but he lowered his gun. And in that moment, something shifted in him, not peace, not clarity, but a readiness. He turned and walked out of the cave, the whispers behind him fading with every step. He didn't look back. Whatever part of him had been buried here, he had faced it, but he also knew. This valley hadn't given up its secrets. It had merely postponed them, and he was not done walking through its bones. Inside the mountain's heart, where metal groaned and the ghosts of men whispered through shattered halls, Commander Junaid stood at the edge of a room unlike any other. It wasn't part of the original base. The walls weren't concrete or steel, but something older, etched with circular carvings and symbols that pulsed faintly like veins beneath skin. The air here felt alive, watching, listening. Dr. Ikra followed closely. Behind, her breath fogging as she stepped through the threshold. This wasn't in the blueprints. "No," Junaid replied, "but the dreams led here." On the far end of the chamber, a dais stood. Upon it, a black mirror floated midair, suspended by unseen forces. Around it, 6 skeletal remains, knelt in silent reverence, each bearing military insignias from various nations long gone. One wore the same patch Junaid had found on his own jacket years ago, the sword with 3 stars. The ones that had haunted him. Ikra whispered, "What is this?" Junaid stepped closer, the mirror reflecting not his face, but memories, moments long buried. The mirror didn't show the present, it showed the soul. He saw himself, younger, bloodied, running through fire, screams in his comes. They're closing in. Someone had yelled, "Junaid, get out," but he hadn't. He stayed. He saw his squad in the command bunker, trapped, injured. He remembered dragging each one out while mortar fell. The final blast had taken half the mountain and 5 of his men. Only he walked out. Only he. His hand trembled. Ikra touched his arm gently. "What do you see?" "Regret," he said. "All of it." Suddenly, the chamber trembled. The mirror pulsed brighter, and the skeletons around it groaned as if waking. A voice low ancient spoke in his mind. Not in words, but in feeling. "The trial begins." From the mirror, smoke poured into the air and coalesced into shapes' faces. The faces of the fallen. Squad mates, civilians, even enemies. Each spoke his name. "Elephas, you survived, you forgot." Junaid dropped to his knees, teeth clenched. "I didn't forget. I remember every one of you." The voice again. "Then prove it." The chamber around them twisted. Ikra screamed as she was thrown back against the wall, but Junaid remained still. He was no longer in the room. He was back in the desert. He was back in the desert. But this time, the sun was wrong, and the air shimmered. Phantom versions of his past, his failures, stood before him. A man bleeding out under collapsed rubble. A woman shot while waving a white flag. A child holding a metal toy that turned out to be a bomb. The desert demanded a reckoning. "Why didn't you save me?" the child asked. "There wasn't time," Junaid began. "But you had time to save yourself." The words cut deeper than any blade, and then the ground began to sink. Back in the chamber, Ikra crawled forward, tears in her eyes. She could see Junaid, but he wasn't moving. His eyes were open, glassy, locked in some mental war. She screamed his name. "Junaid, come back. You don't have to do this alone." But he was alone. In the mirror realm, he fell into darkness, and when he landed, he stood face to face with himself. An exact replica. Same uniform, same scars, but the eyes were dead. "I'm what you became when you buried them," the copy said. "A shell. I had to survive," Junaid whispered. The copy lunged. They fought vicious, primal. Each punch Junaid landed felt like tearing through guilt. Every blow he received was the weight of loss. Around them, echoes of battles past screamed and wept. This was not a fight of flesh. It was a war of soul. "You never forgave yourself," the copy hissed, pinning him. "I didn't know how," Junaid shouted, blood running down his chin. The mirror's voice returned. "Forgiveness is not forgetting. It is remembrance without chains." The world paused. The doppelganger faded. In its place stood his squad, whole and smiling. One stepped forward. "Captain Harris, the man who died shielding Junaid with his body. You carried us this far," Hari said. "Now let us carry you." The weight lifted. Junaid breathed again. He awoke in the chamber with a gasp. The mirror dimmed and the skeletons crumbled into dust. Ikra knelt beside him, her face pale. "You were gone for, I don't know how long. Felt like years," he muttered. Then he stood, steadier than before. He looked at the remains on the ground and saluted. "I saw them, all of them." Ikra's eyes shimmered. "Did they forgive?" "You," he nodded, "and I forgave myself." A passage opened behind the dais. Light spilled in, not artificial, but something pure. They stepped forward together. Outside, storm clouds cracked above the mountain, but inside, the man who walked out was different. He was no longer the last survivor. He was the guardian of memory, the witness of sacrifice, and the soul that returned. The silence after the storm was deafening. Inside the charred skeleton of the bunker, where ashes of the past clung to every crevice, Captain Rayon stood motionless. The others, what remained of them, had already been recovered or buried under the layers of collapsing memory and fractured steel. But not Malik, not the man whose laughter used to echo through the dark, whose boots always hit the ground a beat earlier than the rest. Malik's body was never found, only a scorch mark on the northern corridor, and a shattered piece of his dog tag, twisted and burned. Rayon stared at it now, fingers trembling as he turned the metal shard in his palm. It felt wrong, to light, as if it mocked the weight of the sacrifice that had been made. The rescue crew behind him remained respectfully quiet, even as the medics scanned for final traces of survivors. Nothing. The bunker was officially declared, sealed a grave to more than 70 souls who had entered it alive. "Sir," one of the younger officers finally broke the silence, his voice cautious. "We need to get you out of here. It's unstable." Rayon didn't answer immediately. He looked at the wall to his left, the place where Malik had drawn their daughters' names in charcoal, where he used to say, "If we're going to die, let them know we remembered love even in hell." He touched the faded scribbles. The charcoal was nearly gone now, worn down by smoke and war, but he could still trace the shape of a heart with his thumb. And in that moment, something shattered inside him. Not in a way that made noise, not in the way movies show with screams or clenched fists, but in a quiet collapse, like a soul folding into itself. They said he walked out on his own. No stretcher, no assistance. Just his coat, draped over his shoulders, the broken tag in his fist, and a face drained of anything human. Some swore his eyes were dry, not a single tear. Others whispered that he was mumbling Malik's name under his breath with every step. But what truly unnerved them was how still he was. He didn't ask about the war anymore. He didn't file reports, didn't debrief. He just sat in the infirmary for days, staring at the wall like it owed him something. An answer, a miracle, a rewind. It was the chaplain who finally approached him, sitting beside Rayon without saying a word for 10 full minutes. Then he simply asked, "Do you believe in ghosts, Captain?" Rayon didn't look at him. "No," he answered flatly, "but I believe in men who become them." The chaplain frowned. "You think Malik's a ghost?" Rayon finally turned his head. His voice was thin, almost foreign to his own ears. "He died keeping us alive, and I let him. I let him stay behind. I left him in that fire, and now I can't feel anything." "But you lived," the chaplain said gently. "That means you carry what he gave." Rayon stood. "He gave me his end. After that, no one saw him for weeks. He vanished from base. His room left untouched, save for the neatly folded uniform and a sealed envelope addressed to Malik's wife. Some thought he deserted. Others thought he went north. where the last known rebel nests were rumored to be hiding in the mountains. But the truth, like everything about Rayon, was more complicated than rumors would allow, because the war may have ended on paper, but inside Rayon, it was still raging. One night, months later, a young boy, the orphan of a soldier who had served under Rayon, found a man sitting outside the old train station, staring at the stars. The boy offered him a piece of bread. "You look hungry?" he said. Rayon accepted it without a word, chewed slowly. Then, finally, he whispered, "Do you know what it means to leave your soul behind?" The boy, too young to understand war but old enough to understand sorrow, nodded once. "It means someone you love didn't come with you." Rayon's breath caught in his throat. Of all the generals, lieutenants, psychologists, and priests, it was a child who spoke the one truth no adult dared say. He wept then, not loudly, not desperately, just quiet tears, sliding down the face of a man who had carried too much death and not enough goodbye. That same night, he returned to Malek's widow. No words were needed. He simply placed the scorched dog tag in her hand and whispered, "He saved me." She closed her fingers around it, nodded through her tears, and hugged him as if he were the last living thread of her husband. From then on, Rayon began to walk. Again, not as a captain, not as a soldier, but as a man searching for the rest of his soul, the pieces left in bunkers and battlefields. In friendships lost and fire never forgotten. People say he visits the families of every man and woman who died under his command, not to apologize, not to explain, just to listen, to bear witness, to carry a little of their pain so they don't have to hold it all alone. And when he's alone, in the stillness between dusk and dawn, he talks to Malek, every night. Some say it's madness, others say it's grace. But whatever it is, it keeps him human. It keeps him human, because he may have walked out alive, but Malek never let him walk out empty. The world after war is never what they tell you. It isn't parades or ribbons or a hero's welcome. It's quiet, too quiet, as if the planet itself is holding its breath, unsure whether to weep or scream. For Captain Essen Raza, that silence was deafening. He returned home to a city that had changed its face. The buildings stood, but the people behind the windows wore expressions carved from loss. They recognized him. How could they not? The man who walked alone had become a ghost story, a name passed in reverence, a myth. But myths don't go to bakeries at 6 a.m. because they can't sleep. Myths don't wake up screaming, drenched in sweat. Myths don't break down in traffic because a kid's balloon popping sounds just like a landmine. Essen tried to live quietly. He took a small apartment on the edge of town, near the hills. He planted a small garden, more out of habit than hope. But the earth never stayed quiet either. Every crack of thunder sent him ducking. Every smell of diesel and ash threw him back to that jungle. And always, he remembered their faces. The squad, his brothers. He carried them with him in everything. Each scar on his body had a name. The burn on his right arm, Yuna. The limp in his knee, Amin. The knot in his shoulder, Tariq. Every injury was a tombstone. And the tattoo etched between his shoulder blades, the one the general had once frozen, Atwa's a prayer in Urdu, written in the shaky handwriting of the squad's youngest, a boy who'd died, whispering it into Essen's ear. The country wanted to honor him. They offered medals, interviews, speeches, but he declined them all. What would he say? That he had survived by chance. That the jungle had let him go, not because he was brave, but because it wanted someone left behind to tell the story. That, he screamed for his dead friends every night in a language even he no longer recognized. He didn't want honor. He wanted quiet, but quiet didn't want him. One morning, a letter arrived. Hand-delivered, no address, no name on the front, just a wax seal black, with an eagle clutching a sword. He knew that symbol. It was from the division, the hidden arm, of the army that had sent his squad on that cursed mission in the first place. He hadn't heard from them in years. He'd thought they had buried the mission alongside the men. Inside the envelope, a single sentence. "You left your soul in the jungle, we need it back." That night, he didn't sleep. He sat by the window, the letter in one hand, a picture of his squad in the other. They were all smiling, laughing. It was a lie frozen in time. Why now? Why him? By morning, he had packed a bag. The location was included in the envelope. Not coordinates, just a name. Camp Ashes. He knew it well. It wasn't on any map. It never had been, but it was real. A black site. A testing ground, where soldiers were broken and remade. When he arrived, the gates opened without a word. No salutes, no fanfare. Just shadows and uniforms. Faces he didn't know. No one spoke until he was inside a debriefing room that smelled of bleach and blood. Across the table sat a woman in gray, not army, not civilian. Something in between. "You're not supposed to be alive," she said flatly. "I get that a lot," he replied. She slid a folder toward him. Inside, satellite images, infrared scans, body heat signatures. The jungle was burning again, but it wasn't war this time. It was something else. "We reopened the site," she said. 3 weeks ago we sent in another squad. Highly trained, better equipped, better intel. He waited. They disappeared within 48 hours. No contact, no signals, nothing. Essen closed the folder. "You want me to go back?" "No," she said, standing slowly. We want him to go back. It took him a moment. You think I'm still that man? You're the only one who's ever come out alive. He shook his head. That's not an advantage. That's a curse. She handed him a small object, a tag. Dog tags burned around the edges, but they weren't his. Tariq's, he whispered. We found them near the tree line. That's the only thing we've found at the site. His knuckles turned white around the metal. The jungle had called him back. And now, it was offering bait. He stood, bag in hand. When do we leave? She smiled for the first time now. They flew low over the canopy, in silence. No radio chatter. Just the drone of the engine and the beating of Essen's heart. When they reached the drop point, he looked down. It hadn't changed. Green, endless, alive, and hungry. As he stepped out of the chopper, he felt the weight return. Not of the gear, but of memory, of guilt, of promise. He had left his soul behind once. Now he would retrieve it to bury what was left of him. Beside it, the jungle did not greet him, but it was waiting, and so was something else. Something no man had seen and lived to describe. Essen tightened the straps on his pack, adjusted the rifle on his shoulder, and stepped into the green mouth of the world that had once swallowed him whole. He did not look back. There was nothing behind him worth seeing. Only ghosts, but ahead. Ahead was the truth, and this time, he wouldn't walk out alone.